Hey everyone, I want to talk about depression today and consider it as a psychic and metaphysical process and through an esoteric lens when we consider the astrological component as well. So I'm on the move today. I'd actually filmed a few videos already and then the microphone wasn't plugged in properly, so that was a pain in my butt. In any case, we're doing it again here and now. So depression. Every person who works with the soul in any meaningful way will come to experience depressive states. It is part of the process of astral purification. It is also a very big part of the natural process of psychic transformation. So we have a fourth ray quality here. The human kingdom is the fourth ray. The fourth kingdom in nature, we have the pairs of opposites that come into play with the fourth ray. That is the instinctual part of the human being, the consciousness part of the human being, or the soul part, reaching up towards that fifth kingdom of souls, Venus, the higher perception, and all of this, bringing the instinctual nature under control and then into fusion with the solar light and with the divine will and the divine plan and all of this. And that necessarily brings about the harmony through conflict, which is this alchemical process of transmutation, transformation. The fourth ray is connected to psychology. We see the Taurus-Scorpio axis as the strong fourth ray axis in the Zodiac, really evoking that process of the imbuing of the body with light and then the necessary depression or dark night of the soul that comes with that when we start responding to that inner light. So Taurus-Scorpio is a strong depression axis, as well as all of the water signs owing to their the slightly stronger astral polarization and the greater sensitivity that comes with that element. And then we have something interesting as well where we've got Capricorn and Aquarius, which are often attributed to depression as well, which is an interesting contrast when we consider it relative to the water signs, because both Capricorn and Aquarius have more of a reputation traditionally for being more detached and unemotional. Aquarius is a fifth ray sign, so we have some of the more mental aspect of Aquarius that comes through there, and then in traditional astrology they would reflect that through the Saturn lens, being the orthodox ruler or the traditional ruler. And then in Capricorn, we have this earthy cardinal sign, which is Saturn ruled, unemotive, and that's where the moon is in detriment as well, where it's something like that emotional nature has a hard time. This is personality lens, although esoterically, the moon has its detriment because in a similar way as to the fall in Scorpio, where the old outworn aspects of substance goes to die, moon in its fall, transformation, where Uranus then is exalted, where the spirit is released and reunited with substance. We have moon in detriment. The power of the moon is lessened, that is to say, at the esoteric level. The old outworn parts of the form or the personality self is lessened in a sign of spiritual initiation, which is Capricorn. So that's the higher octave, of course. But the Capricorn Aquarius lens brings about this valley mountaintop experience, and it speaks to the way of discipleship, the way of initiation with those trials and tribulations that we go through. We have to go through the valley of death and the depths before we can reach the mountaintop. The awareness of duality that comes with these signs too. Aquarius is also quite connected to Pisces. There's often a blended quality between these two, especially as it's understood through the esoteric astrology. And we see a connection there with Jupiter, orthodox ruler of Pisces, also esoteric ruler of Aquarius, and the higher octave of Aquarius being that drive towards impersonal love. And Jesus said to his disciples, follow the man with a pitcher of water, then you'll enter the kingdom. That is to say, world service will bring about your eventual liberation and all of this, your salvation. So that connection there between the love principle and the collective service principle, that blending of the energies between Aquarius and Pisces that we see here, there's that sensitivity, the mass compassion, and Aquarius can have that. There's often one of those funny sayings with Aquarians of, hate people, love humanity. And that's a little echo to what is at the deeper level esoterically, this sign of world service. So there's a sensitivity that can come to mass suffering, and when we're responding to that spiritual urge, the drive towards wanting to be helpful and wanting to bestow love into the group, and to humanity, our brothers and sisters, and the necessary sensitivity and suffering that can come with that. Also the connection to Capricorn, with the feeling the level of the distance between you and the mountaintop. And there's also a Taurian quality there too, because the big Taurus problem, the struggle that we see with this fourth ray energy here, is when we start responding in Taurus to Vulcan, where we sense the will and the purpose and the plan, which is the function of Vulcan. Right, it's close to the sun. There's a similar flavour to Mercury there. It's so close to the spirit, or that centralising force that is the higher octave of the soul and then the monad. In sensing that, and then being so deeply immersed in form as we are in Taurus, the fixity of the earth and all of the density and energy and the pranic force that comes with that the sense of duality, as DK notes in the books, is really strengthened and really emphasized in that sign Taurus. And this is where we can get a static depression, as it is so referred there, a difficulty moving, having a hard time bringing the higher dimension into the lower dimension, and the struggle that ensues here. So these are some of the zodiacal pieces when it comes to depression. We talked about Mountain Valley. And getting a little bit more into the psychological experience of depression now, which is still very much embodied through the Taurus-Scorpio axis, and bearing in mind that anyone working with the soul is under the influence of Taurus and Scorpio, because Taurus rules the world disciple. We're working with the light to penetrate it into substance, and that will necessarily, certainly when we cross that threshold of discipleship, take us into the tests of Scorpio and the astral hell realms. So the depression experience, sometimes broken down with the word when we say deep rest, depression. Now we'll talk a little bit more about the process of this. So the function of depression is that withdrawal of pranic energy, psychic energy, the basic vitality of the personality in the lower three realms. Moonfall in Scorpio now, it's the embodiment of this process that I'm talking about, is withdrawing your energy from the basic forms of your personality life. And whenever we're doing that, it is an experience of being flushed down the toilet. It happens a bit in Pisces too, when we're talking about the death of the old. It's a Plutonic experience. Death of the old to resurrect or bring about the birth of the solar light. So this experience of going in and down, and one of those psychological symptoms of depression is not feeling enjoyment anymore in any of the things that used to, not being, sort of going into all of the things, let's say it's food, sex, some of the Taurian themes, or this hobby, or this friendship group, or my relationship, even my family, whatever the forms are that are still ignited by the fundamental psychic life flow of the personality. When we're going through periods of transformation, there's a withdrawal, a pulling in, and then it goes in and down to die. So when we're going through this process, depression is the natural experience. So what we need to do, or what we can do, is at the very least hold an awareness of the reality of this process. Because when we're going through a process like this, you cannot really fight it. The struggle makes it worse. Acceptance, and one of the strategies that are pointed out specifically about dealing with astral glamour, as opposed to illusion and different aspects of distortion and glamour. The astral problem is resolved through a gentle, not gentle, but it's a sort of, it dissipates, that's the word. It's a dissipation of astral substance. And that word dissipate isn't necessarily a fight, you see. To dissipate something, it implies more of a persistence, there's a gradualness to it. It's, it's something that we have to be able to walk with more slowly, and just that's that gentle, ongoing persistence, and to find that place of trust internally that even though it feels crap right now, I'm trusting the process. It's this sort of mentality that we need to find. So the other big thing about depression that I really wanted to highlight is through our own psychological maturation, being able to discern the difference between what we just spoke about as the natural organic process of depression that is the necessary process before transformation, transmutation, transfiguration, and the emergence of new life. That's the Taurus-Scorpio axis. Death and desire dies, old life, the personality dies from Taurus to Scorpio, and then the reverse is the dark night of the soul gives way to the bull of light, which then becomes that Vulcan, yeah, I'm just moving with my purpose, moving with my purpose. That's the white magician there at that point. It's that turning over of all the dense energies, and all of the earth, water axes describe some angle of that process, right? Which is why they're so often connected to healing and diseases as well. All of that is describing the natural and necessary process of depressive states and meeting astral states of being. Knowing the difference between those versus states of negativity that are perpetuated through wrong identification, wrong intellectual stimulation, and a lack of true relationship with process. What I'm talking about here is perhaps the tendency for victimhood in the water signs, a little bit more Cancer and Pisces energies here. And in the man's psyche, it shows up as anima possession, the feminine possession. There's an interesting thing that people talk about in the realm of some of the culture wars and the men versus women stuff and relational nonsense that goes on here, where some of the men will complain about, yeah, women say they want a sensitive man, but then when a man is sensitive, then they lose attraction to him, or they dump him, or they go off and find the more heavy-duty masculine dude. Now, there is something here true about the polarity, but moving that aside, what I would say, if you've got two mature people, let's say, in relationship, and there's a basic sense of love there, if that kind of dynamic does appear, I would suggest that what's really going on is that the man is in his anima possession, which is not the same as true sensitivity. Because in the moment that he is possessed by a complex, by the anima, by an emotional state, he's in a mood. And a mood is not a true feeling. And actually what happens, and this is for men and women too, when we are possessed by any kind of complex or astral moods in this way, they put us in emotional states, but a lack of relationship is going on in life at that moment because we're possessed. And the possession means that we're not seeing things objectively. And that is very different than meeting a depressive experience as a sort of releasing through the body, or releasing grief, or a feeling of trauma through the body in some kind of process like that. And women have a bit more experience with this if they're in conscious relationship with the menstrual cycle. And I've talked about menstruation in relationship to the moon before, and moonfall in Scorpio, and all of the cycles of death that go on. Because that moment, that period just pre the beginning of menstruation where the bleeding begins, it's like, that's sort of the passing through all of that material. And that's where there can be an emptying out. And yes, there's what we see as the PMS, where there can be a reactive or sensitive state. But if we're moving with it consciously, there's generally a sense of meeting difficult feelings and then passing them through. So it's a big difference to be in actual relationship with a feeling state and then to pass it through, or to allow it to empty itself out in its own time, because we cannot put a time stamp on the various processes of release and integration and healing, versus being possessed by an emotional state where you're in a mood, or when a woman is with her animus thinking, and the animus is doing all kinds of weird stuff where she's possessed by thinking and thoughts, but it's not true thinking. So we talked about the anima with the man and the feeling, not true feeling. But with the animus, it's warped and distorted thinking, neurotic thinking, oh, I got to do this, or however it's showing up, or negative critical thoughts towards oneself. You suck, you're terrible, can't believe it. Where there's all of this thinking going on, but it's not true thinking. It's being possessed by the automated mental processes as it pertains to the archetypal energy versus the true directed thinking. And this is very much a Pisces theme here that we're talking about. And especially now as we've got the retrograde happening back through Pisces, the Saturn in Pisces period was just hell for me, absolute torment. And as it's going through this retrograde again, I'm coming back against all of these things that I struggled so immensely with, but there's much more consciousness around my own psychic distortions, because especially when we're talking about the archetypal energies and the complexes, it's sort of one thing that leads into this thing, which leads into this thing, which leads. So there's a lot there, which is why it's so easy to get the flooding experience in Pisces. We get drowned by those psychic forces, that mutability of its mutable water signs, all of that astral material. So we get swamped by that. But yeah, I'm just finding in this retrograde and reflection period now, oh, okay, it's really trying to differentiate from those possessions in the moment and then take back control of that mind. Saturn is the mental principle, right? So it's these tests of bringing lesser mind into higher mind or mental control. And the theme of Pisces is so much connected to the transmutation of negativity to positivity. And that's not stupid positive thinking, which is just dissociative, or what we see with a lot of the New Age nonsense as we know it now in our present 21st century epoch and period. You know, affirmations and shit, but it's unrelated to anything that's really going on. But true positivity in being able to accept our circumstances, but also see the beauty in our circumstances and to know how to continue stepping those steps along the way, which is kind of an antidote to all forms of depression, really. It's like, okay, I feel not so great right now, but look at the life I have built, or look at what's working. And for me, let's say I get really attacked relative to my work. So I mentioned that my audio didn't record on my last few videos that I made. So when I found that out, that really activates a lot of archetypal constellations for me, because I have a lot of warped stuff around my work through the animus problem, through the negative father complex and all of that. So it's a real, like, it just goes to full on negativity. Like, I'm an idiot, my life sucks, look at you, you can't even. It's just all of those different things. And I got slammed with that. Oh man, I thought I'd kind of gotten a bit further with this. It's a really heavy hit with that psychic force. But then okay, hold on, let's just, be with my mood for a moment, and then where can I just switch it? And it was just a couple of things where make a bit more space for myself to amend that mistake. So making time for myself to refilm that, tomorrow, rather than have to wait till next week when I'd usually have to do it. So it's a practical thing. So that would be a moving into a Virgo. Sort of, okay, you can suffer, or you can just be practical about it and make those benefic steps to improvement. That's a very Virgo theme. And then coming back to a more positive, bigger picture kind of thinking, and actually everything is okay, and look at this, and things are actually really good where they are, and I have much more momentum than I did back then. So that's kind of an offshoot now that I just went on in terms of negativity. And the main subject matter was meant to be about depression, but to bring it back to the original theme, it's the difference between moods, possession, and negativity versus the genuine suffering, the genuine depressive experience, grief, trauma, whatever it is that is trying to be flushed out and down, and then for that to be revitalized. And eventually it becomes obvious to make that distinction, but in the early phases, it can be really tricky for people, especially where there's a strong animus problem, where the thinking can really possess the woman, or where there's a strong anima problem, where the feeling nature or the moods can really possess the man. And we'll see a little bit more of a tendency towards that based on certain afflictions in the horoscope, Saturn placements, Mercury placements, mental principles, moon placements, and certainly if you've got a man with a lot of water sign in the chart, there's more likelihood to be an anima problem, where the woman has more, let's say, mental or masculine signs, Aries, Aquarius, some of the air signs as well, other air signs, Gemini, where there's a mercurial problem. So there's some general things that we can look for that can indicate some of the psychological problem in that space. But in any case, depression is an inevitable part of our experience. The key is to be able to discern the difference between those two things which we just talked about, to detach where we can from any potential mental building up out of depression, because that's a really tricky thing to do, because it's really easy to just make the problem worse through the intellectual obsessing over the astral problem. Wow, I really am suffering. This is really going on, and am I ever going to catch a break? Those thoughts are natural, and we're not always going to be able to discipline our mind as such, but to try and make space around that. Okay, this is part of our psychological maturation as well as a spiritual maturation through metaphysical process, because it really rounds out our personalities. Particularly as Westerners, we have so much of that concretized mental problem, being in a more Saturnian or lesser Capricornian angled society. There's a lot of preferences and division of thinking and a crystallization of how things should be. That's very animusy there, where how things should be versus what they are. So that's part of the fourth ray higher quality of wisdom that can come through psychological process, through learning how to balance the opposites. And whenever we talk about anima, animus, it's very fourth ray there. And then a little echo to Libra, which yes is a third ray sign, but has a bit of a fourth ray quality to it in terms of how the opposites play out at the psychic level with the balancing of those pairs within the personality. And yeah, coming back to and finding that place of trust in the process. And that will be different depending on the person's level of development, the level of sacrifice or commitment that has been made in the life. Many people who go through really intense dark nights of the soul, it's a consequence of a real deep surrender to that soul life. That's where we start to see more discipleship, Scorpio tests and challenges there. And it can take people out. People can be bedridden for years and chronic health issues and all of this. So it's part of the process. You find people such as myself or those people who have lived through this just as reminders of the fact that this path can be tread and should be tread and is a part of what it means to live a life of integrity. Integrity being very Taurus-y word there, the artistic refinement of the imbuing of the light within substance. You have to pass through your own hell and through your own, get really efficient in a way at walking your own death and being in a very deep loyalty and love, actually, of that process. It's a lot to love. There's a lot in ourselves to imbue with light substance and to have to contend. But it is an inevitable threshold that we will all cross eventually. So that was my thoughts on depression for today. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.